Roman civilization from the founding of the city in 753 BC to the Ottoman capture of Constantinople in AD 1453 was 22 centuries of history. While there were civil wars and of course the famous division of the empire into west and east, unlike its Asian counterpart of China, there wasn't really often a period where it would shatter into tons of pieces and fight each other, which is an impressive feat for any civilization. But there is one period that could potentially be considered Rome's equivalent to the Warring States period. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade began, and famously, the European knights did not go to the Middle East like in previous crusades, but instead went towards the fortress city of Constantinople, capital of the still existing Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire. While Constantinople was able to hold out against many attacks and sieges in its history, this time it did not, and the Crusaders would capture and sack the city. The commander of the Crusader forces, Boniface of Montferrat, and his ally the Doge of Venice, Enrico Dandolo, crafted a partition treaty for the Byzantine Empire for themselves. Venice would acquire some lands, while the rest would be a Crusader-ran version of the Roman Empire that historians prefer to call the Latin Empire. However, despite taking Constantinople, these partition plans only partially worked. The Latin Empire would prove to have many problems internally and externally. But also, many lands promised to them or Venice didn't simply surrender just because Constantinople did. While Byzantine Emperor Alexios V, who fled Constantinople, would quickly be imprisoned and executed by Latin forces, there were three other factions across the crumbled empire who would continue to resist the Crusaders and Venetians, each seeing themselves as legitimate continuations of the Byzantine Empire. This would lead to just over half a century of conflict that would be a race to restore Byzantium. But before I cover that race, I'm going to talk about this video's sponsor, Ridge. Ridge was already famous for their metal compact devices, like their famous wallet and key case, which I personally use every day. They recently introduced a new leather wallet that keeps their unique design and features, but now with a more familiar and traditional leather exterior. I recently acquired one of my own, and it's genuinely impressive how they managed to fuse both styles together so seamlessly, pun intended. For those who prefer leather over metal but still want the cool features a Ridge wallet has to offer, this is definitely the wallet for you. Ridge is currently having an up to 40% off Father's Day sale through June 15th, and I can't think of a better Father's Day gift than one of the new leather wallets. Go to ridge.com/emperor with the link below to get a new wallet or key case today. Absolutely worth it. That's ridge.com/emperor. Thanks again to Ridge for sponsoring this video. So while the Latin Empire was able to take control of the rough modern-day areas of Greece and the Bosporus, there were three opposing factions that each claimed the Roman Byzantine throne. First, there was the Empire of Trebizond along the Anatolian and Crimean coasts. This empire was formed by two brothers named Alexios and David Komnenos even before Constantinople had fallen. Their claim to Byzantine legitimacy was that they were the sons of former Byzantine Emperor Andronikos I, who was assassinated back in 1185, so in their eyes they were the rightful heirs to the throne to begin with, so they made themselves co-emperors of their new state, although David would end up dying 8 years into their co-reign. Despite being the first successor state, they would end up having the least amount of success in attempting to reconquer the empire, thanks mostly to the next faction, the Empire of Nicaea. The Nicaean Empire, or Nicene Empire, there's many ways to pronounce this apparently, was founded in northwest Anatolia in 1204 after the fall of Constantinople, thanks to Constantine and Theodore Lascaris. They were descended from a family of nobility which had considerable influence in Constantinople before the Fourth Crusade. Theodore had married the daughter of former Byzantine Emperor Alexios III, so there was a connection to the royal family. There was also an account by medieval historian Niketas Koniates, who claimed that Constantine was offered the Byzantine throne after Alexios V fled the city out of desperation, but it ended up not mattering as he was also forced to flee the city as well. However, other historians dispute this account for the simple reason that his brother Theodore ended up being the brother in charge of things in Nicaea. The final faction was the Despotate of Epiros, founded in 1205 in the far western edge of the collapsed empire in modern-day Albania by Michael Komnenos Doukas. Michael's personal history before the Crusade is disputed, with some claiming he may have been appointed governor of Epiros or possibly have married a government official into prominence, but somehow he ended up in control of Epiros after the Crusade. Originally, Epirus was supposed to be given to Venice in the partition, but other than nearby islands and a few ports, Venice was preoccupied on occupying other territories, and Michael was able to take advantage of that to strengthen his hold. With Venice being half-hearted in dealing with him and the Latin Empire being busy with other matters, Michael secured his domains, and for the time being agreed to even cater to the Catholic Church to stave off attacks. At the same time though, he was also notably paying the ransom of former Byzantine Emperor Alexios III and managed to release him from prison altogether. Alexios III naturally wanted to reclaim the Byzantine throne for himself, and decided to confirm Michael's title of despot as a reward. However, ironically, Alexios III would end up being captured in 1211 in Asia Minor and imprisoned by the Nicaeans, dying later that year. All of the people who founded these three new states would end up dying before the Latin Empire would be defeated. But as time passed, the Latin Empire would get weaker. Aside from fighting with these factions, the Bulgarians to the north were also a threat to security. With no borders safe, the next few decades would be Epirus, Bulgaria, and Nicaea chipping territory from the Latin Empire bit by bit. Trebizond, in the meantime, was actually out of the game in 1214 thanks to the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. Yes, that's right, another group claiming to be related to Rome. In 1214, they captured the city of Sinope from Trebizond and forced them to become a vassal. They still existed, but were weakened and also territorially cut off from Nicaea and simply unable to ever have a chance at retaking Constantinople. Epirus, however, would go from the weakest position to perhaps the strongest by 1224. Michael's half-brother successor Theodore Komnenos Doukas captured the major city of Thessalonica from the Latin Empire. This not only significantly weakened the Latin Empire, but also gave Theodore the confidence to have himself crowned Emperor of Thessalonica and more actively rival Nicaea for the Byzantine throne. Not to be outdone, the same year the Nicaeans also defeated the Latin Empire at the Battle of Poimanenon, which resulted in the Latin Empire signing a treaty to abandon Asia except for Nicomedia and the coast directly across from Constantinople. Then the next year, Nicaea also managed to cross the Aegean and seize Adrianople. Ironically though, the deciding factor on who would end up having the biggest claim to Constantinople would be the Bulgarians. They managed to drive Nicaea out of Europe, and then in 1230, Epirus thought they could conquer the Bulgarians, but they failed, and as a result the Bulgarians would end up driving them back further west and even acquire vassalage from Thessalonica. But despite the Bulgarians defeating both factions, Epirus was more severely defeated than Nicaea. Nicaea under Emperor John III, through diplomatic marriage, attempted to form an alliance with Bulgaria to lay siege to Constantinople in 1235, but unfortunately both the siege and the alliance would fail. Not to be deterred though, John III would manage to seize Thessalonica for himself in 1242, and in 1246 managed to capture most of Thrace from Bulgaria, now effectively isolating the Latin Empire in the Bosporus Straits. Then within another year, they were effectively at Constantinople's gates once again, not too different from how the Ottomans would surround the city 2 centuries later. The next decade would result in Nicaea continuing to keep the Bulgarians and Epirochians back. John III would die, and his successor Theodore II would also die quickly of sickness. Eventually in 1258, John IV was on the throne, but he was very young, so in 1259 Michael VIII became co-emperor. In 1260 Nicaea would besiege Constantinople and once again fail, but then strangely next year, on July 25th, 1261, a Nicaean scouting force of all things was able to seize the city at night without a siege through sheer luck, thus quietly ending the Latin Empire. With this, Michael VIII decided he didn't want to share the throne with a kid, so he decided to blind his brother on his 11th birthday, which according to Byzantine law made him ineligible for the throne. Oh, and if you think that's cruel, I'll also add that his birthday was also on Christmas. But with the Latin Empire gone, the Byzantine Empire was restored as the proper continuation of the Roman Empire, and would last for roughly another 2 centuries. Nicaea had won the race to restore Byzantium, but Epirus and Trebizond certainly didn't go away, and would also continue. As the Ottoman Turks expanded in both Anatolia and the Balkans, they would end up taking Constantinople in 1453 to end the Byzantine Empire, while Trebizond would fall 8 years later in 1461. Then Epirus would be fully conquered in 1479. In hindsight, knowing all of Roman history, it's super easy to almost see these final 2 centuries as desperate clawing against the inevitability of decline. Even after restoring Byzantium, it wasn't nearly what it was before 1204, and certainly not the same as during the times of Justinian or Augustus. But clearly none of them knew the future, and I think it tells how compelling and inspiring the idea of Rome and its legacy still was all of those centuries later. I'm Emperor Tigerstar, and I'll see you guys next time.